This is question number 3 of the sample assessment paper, June 2019, paper 1. So the question says that figure 1 shows a human heart. Here is figure 1. It shows a diagram of the human heart dissected and its structures clearly. So before we start to solve this question, let's have a quick review of the human heart structure. This one is the right atrium. These two are the atriums. These two are the ventricle. This one is the left atrium. This one is the right ventricle. And this one is the left ventricle. So as we know that blood enters the right atrium first from our body, as it comes into the heart via the vena cava to the right atrium. Then from the right atrium, it travels to the right ventricle, and then it is transferred to the lungs via the pulmonary artery, which carries the deoxygenated blood. All right. So this one might be the pulmonary artery, and then from the lungs, the blood is going to enter through the left atrium. Then it is going to be transferred to the left ventricle, and from the left ventricle it is going to pass through the aorta, which is this part. It is the largest blood vessel of the body, and from the aorta it is going to be transferred to the different parts of the body. All right. Okay, so let's answer part A. Part A says that which part of the heart pumps blood to the lungs. All right. So since blood is going to the lungs, we know that from Vena Cava, blood is going to come to the right atrium. From there, it is going to come to the right ventricle. From the ventricle, it is going to the lungs through the pulmonary artery. So since they have mentioned here no pulmonary artery, but the atrium and left atrium and ventricle, and then right atrium and right ventricle, we can say that the blood is going to the lungs via the right ventricle. Hence, the answer will be D. Okay. All right. Part 2 says that name blood vessels W and X. So let's move back to the diagram. So W is this part and X is this part. As we just discussed about the heart structure and how blood is flowing through the heart to the lungs, and then from the lungs to the heart and then to the body via the double circulation process. We can say that since blood is coming through this part into the right atrium, W can be vena cava. And as we all know, this part X, which is supplying the blood from the left ventricle to the body, it is aorta. So X should be aorta. So let's solve this question. Here I have answered that W is vena cava and X is going to be aorta. All right. So let's move to part 3. Part 3 says that describe the differences in the composition of blood carried by the blood vessels W and X. And it is a 2-marker question. All right. Okay, so let's move to the diagram. So in the diagram here we see W is this part which is supplying blood to the right atrium, which means that it is bringing blood from the body to the heart. And X is this part which is responsible for carrying the oxygenated blood to the different parts of the body. So hence, this part is bringing blood from the body, which means that blood in W, which is the vena cava, is going to be deoxygenated, and blood in X, which is the aorta, is going to be oxygenated since it is coming from the lungs to the heart and then passes through the aorta. All right. So we can spot one difference is that blood in X will be oxygenated and blood in W will be deoxygenated. Deoxygenated means that it is going to have more carbon dioxide. Oxygenated means that it is going to have more oxygen, which it is going to supply to the different cells. All right. So I have written the answer over here that blood vessel W contains deoxygenated blood, whereas blood vessel X contains oxygenated blood. Blood vessel W contains more carbon dioxide than blood in X. Okay. Yes, blood in W contains more carbon dioxide. You can write the reverse also, that blood in X contains more oxygen than blood in W. Alright, since it is a 2-marker, The mark is coming from the mentioning of W contains oxygenated or W contains deoxygenated blood, whereas X is containing oxygenated blood. And next mark is coming that it contains more carbon dioxide. So if you are writing for perhaps X, then you must write that it contains more oxygen, and hence you secure 2 marks. Okay, all right. So moving on to part B. Part B says that the diagram shows two blood vessels that are connected to the heart. This is blood vessel 1 and this is blood vessel 2. So as you can see, they have differences over here. The elastic muscular valves, their lumen sizes, they have differences. Part 1 says that give a reason why blood vessel 1 represents X. So X was the aorta as far as I remember, but you can still check in the diagram. And blood vessel 1 is looking like this. So let's have a quick view of the diagram. So X was the aorta, which is an artery. And since the aorta is an artery, which means that it is going to have a small lumen. Also, it is going to have thick muscular elastic walls. And if we look at the diagram 1 here, which is the blood vessel 1, you can see that it has a smaller lumen also and thick muscular walls compared to blood vessel 2. Hence, we can say that X is representing blood vessel 1. So let's answer this question. So since it is a one marker question, I have written that because blood vessel 1 has narrower lumen, um, so it is similar to X over here, as you can see. All right. Part 2 says that the diameter of the lumen in blood vessel 1 is 10 millimeter. The diagram has been drawn 50 times larger than the actual size of the blood vessels. Calculate the actual size of the lumen of these blood vessels. Give your answers in micrometer. All right. So they have given us the diameter of the blood vessel 1 right over here. And it has been says that the diagram has been drawn 50 times larger than the actual size of the blood. All right. So let's solve this question. So here I have solved this question. I have, since the diameter is 10 millimeter, here I have divided 10 by 50, which is the number of times the actual blood vessel is larger than the one drawn over here, and it comes is 0.2 millimeter. So this is the actual size of the lumen in millimeter. So to convert it into micrometer, here 1 millimeter is equal to 1000 micrometer. So I have divided 0.2 by 1000. So it comes to 100. So it is 200 micrometer, which is the actual size of the lumen of blood vessel 1. All right. So since we have solved this part, let's move on to part 3, which says that explain how the structure of blood vessel 1 is adapted to help the blood flow through the vessel. It is a 2 marker question. So it is asking about the adaptations of blood vessel 1, which has allowed blood flow. So here we have blood vessel 1 over here. So as you can see, it has a smaller lumen, which means that it increases the pressure of the blood flow when the blood is flowing. Also it has muscular wall that contracts, forcing the blood forward. Okay, all right. So since we know about its mechanism for forcing the blood forward and making the blood flow at a constant pressure that is required for the body, so let's answer this question. Here I have answered that the small lumen allows the high blood pressure to be maintained and the muscular walls contract, forcing the blood to move. Alright, so since it was a 2 marker, the first mark was for this point, that the small lumen allows the high blood pressure to be maintained, and the second mark was for the muscular walls, which is the second point, since we have explained two adaptations of the blood vessel 1. So we are done with this question. Part C states that the diagram shows the interaction of an ACE inhibitor in the renin-angiotensin pathway. This pathway is used by the body to control blood pressure. All right. So here they have provided us a flow diagram. It is showing that Kidney produces renin, which is an enzyme. Renin is going to convert angiotensin, which is a protein, into angiotensin I. All right. And from angiotensin I is going to be converted into angiotensin II by the enzyme angiotensin converting enzyme. Okay. So here is an interference in the enzyme activity of the enzyme catalyzed reaction. The interference is caused by the ACE inhibitors. So ACE inhibitors are basically the substances that are going to either cause delay in the reaction or probably trying to stop the reaction, halt the reaction, prevent the angiotensin converting enzyme from working to convert angiotensin I into 2. So since this question here speaks of inhibitors. Let's have a quick review of how inhibitors are going to work for interfering with the enzyme reaction over here. All right, there are two types of inhibitors over here. One is a competitive inhibitor and one is a non-competitive inhibitor. All right. So what happens is that the basic job of an inhibitor is that it is going to somehow interfere with the reaction of the enzyme catalyzed reaction, which means the work of the enzyme. Here, the competitive inhibitor, what they do is they come and settle anywhere they wish on the active side of the inhibitor. And since the active side is occupied already, the substrate cannot fit into the enzyme, hence the reaction cannot take place unless the inhibitor has moved from its place. So it is going to basically delay the reaction. All right. Okay, and there is another one which is the non-competitive inhibitor, and the work of the non-competitive inhibitor is dangerous. What it does is that dangerous in a way for the enzyme actually. So what it's going to do is that this inhibitor directly tries to stop or basically stop the work of the enzyme. What they're going to do is that they are going to bind to the shape of the enzyme, basically the body of the enzyme, and change the shape of the active site. As we know that all enzymes are specific and they specifically bind to their shaped substrate. So if the active site is once changed, this enzyme can no longer work since it cannot fit into its specific substrate, which means the reaction is not taking place. And hence the activity of the enzyme is directly stopped, which means that the reaction is also halted. Okay. So since we have discussed about how the inhibitors are going to inhibit basically the normal activity of the enzymes and how they cause effect, let's move on to solving this question. All right. So here, one more point I want you to notice is that since it is talking about blood pressure, here is angiotensin and which is converted into angiotensin I, then to angiotensin II. So what is the basic function of angiotensin II? The basic function of angiotensin II is basically to raise the blood pressure, to raise the BP, and hence if the blood pressure is raised, it can cause harm to the body. So what happens is that the ACE inhibitors, ACE means that ACE is the substrate of the angiotensin converting enzyme. So the inhibitors are going to stop the ACE from binding to the enzyme, and hence the reaction will be halted or the reaction is delayed or slowed down. All right, which means that less angiotensin is produced. Hence, angiotensin II is produced less, and this means that the blood pressure does not rise up to any harmful level. All right. So let's solve this question. Part 1 says that explain how the ACE inhibitors are used in the treatment of blood pressure, of high blood pressure, and use the diagram to help you with the answer. All right. So I have already described the diagram. So let's move on to solving this question. Here I have answered the question since it is a 4-marker. It says that ACE inhibitors block the action of angiotensin converting enzyme, which prevents angiotensin I from binding to ACE. Hence, angiotensin I not converted to angiotensin II. This reduces the production of ADH and lowers the blood pressure. All right. So since it is a 4-marker, the mark distribution starts from here, which is ACE inhibitors are blocking the action of angiotensin. All right. And then the next mark comes from that it prevents the angiotensin I from being binding to ACE. Hence, the angiotensin I is not converted to angiotensin II, which is the third mark, and the fourth mark is for that it is going to reduce the production of ADH and lower the blood pressure. All right. Okay, so let's move on to the last part of question number 3, which is part 2. It says that suggest why it is important that the people with high BP take medication to reduce it. So this question basically refers to that how high blood pressure, that how, sorry for the sound problem. It says that how high blood pressure is going to affect the people. So since high blood pressure, as we know, is not healthy for people, which means that high blood pressure can lead to strokes or heart attacks and such diseases. So medication is very necessary to reduce the blood pressure and to keep the heart healthy. All right, so let's answer this question. Since it is a one-mark question, I have answered over here. It says to reduce the risk of stroke, and you can also mention of to reduce the risk of heart attacks or perhaps a heart failure. I have mentioned here strokes. So this is for the one marker. So we are done with this question. Let's move on to the next one.